This video will cover the basics of setting up a multi-site environment in your CMMS. Multi-site functionality is used to separate your CMMS data into partitions based on location. In a regular single-site CMMS, users can access all the information in that CMMS, assuming they have the relevant permissions. In multi-site, however, information is site-specific. You have to be a member of that site to access the data for that site. For example, users in Chicago can only access the work orders and assets for Chicago. Users in Toronto can only access assets and work orders in Toronto. Here's the breakdown of what features are site-specific and what features are shared between all sites. Site-specific objects are tied to a specific site. Assets, work orders, scheduled maintenances, projects, users, purchasing, and messages are all site-specific. Users at other sites can't see them. Some aspects of the CMMS are global and shared between all sites. These include task groups, asset categories, parts and supplies, custom reports, and many of the CMMS settings. To summarize, multi-site lets you split your CMMS up into smaller CMMS apps, all centrally controlled by the administrator. Now, let's go through the process of setting up a multi-site for your CMMS. The first step is to create your top-level assets in your hierarchy. These are the locations that will become sites. You can see that I've created 3 top-level locations in my asset hierarchy: Chicago office, Toronto office, and Dublin office. They're all represented by the brown location icon. Next, we need to convert those locations into sites. To do this, we'll navigate to CMMS Settings and select the Sites tab. You'll notice No Site. This is a system-level site that cannot be edited or removed. No Site is just a catch-all site for all assets that haven't been assigned to a site. I'll click the New button to add a new site, select my top-level location from the drop-down menu, and click OK. Toronto is now set up as a site and represented by the green sites icon. Now, if we navigate back to the asset hierarchy, you'll notice the hierarchy looks a little different. Toronto headquarters is now its own site, while the other locations have been put under the No Site location. The reason is, once we activate multi-site functionality, everything must belong to a site. Until the rest of these locations are assigned to sites, they'll be live under the No Site catch-all. I'll add the rest of my top-level facilities to sites in the same way in the CMMS Settings Sites tab. When I do, it'll look like this. Toronto, Chicago, and Dublin have been transformed from locations into sites. Something to note, you can only set facilities at the top level as sites. For example, if I would like the Chicago South building to be its own site, I would have to relocate this location to a top-level site before I could convert it. I would then have 2 sites in Chicago. The next step is to assign your users to sites. Before your organization starts using multi-site, you need to go into each individual user and update their user group settings so that they're assigned to the right site. Navigate to Settings and then Users. I'll open up Michael. He's a manager currently under No Site. This means he sees all data across the CMMS. The system has automatically added all of my existing users to No Site. It does this so that my users aren't floating while I assign them to their actual sites. Let's say Michael does work in both the Toronto and Chicago office and never visits the Dublin site. Let's set Michael's permissions up accordingly. Select the New button and select Toronto from the drop-down menu. Select the Manager User Group. You could add users to multiple groups at the same site if needed. Click Save. Repeat the process for Chicago, but this time we'll only assign Michael to the Technicians group. Michael is now assigned to 2 sites and has different permissions at those 2 sites. We'll also remove Michael from the No Site catch-all and click OK. Let's see what this looks like from Michael's perspective when he logs in. When I log in as Michael, the first thing you'll notice is the Sites filter box at the top that allows him to toggle between the different sites he belongs to. If he was only assigned to one site, this box would not appear. Michael sees the data for the site he's selected. In this case, Toronto is selected. When we navigate to work orders, we can see that these work orders are all for the Toronto site. In the asset view, he only sees assets for the Toronto site. The same thing is true for purchasing. Notice the menu permissions on the left-hand side. Michael has manager's permissions at Toronto, which means he sees everything from dashboard to reports. When we switch Michael's site toggle to Chicago, in which he only has technician permissions, You'll notice he has access to fewer menu options. In addition, he can only see work orders for the Chicago site in his assigned user view. Repeat the setup for each user in your CMMS. The final step is to assign the guest user to each site. Right now, guest users cannot log work requests at each site, so the guest user must be updated in the same way to have access to the different sites. Navigate to Settings, Users, and open the Guest User. Select the Sites and User Groups tab. I'll add the guest user to 3 sites, making sure that I select Guests and only Guests as the user group. Now when the guest users submit a work request, they'll have the option to choose a site for the request. And that's it. Multisite is now set up for the CMMS.